So, and while we're onto that, this semester we've got Andreas coming in as well. Have any of you met Andreas before? So, Andreas Vassalou, he's a fantastic guy in regards to Revit and AutoCAD. He's got a lot of experience with Revit and AutoCAD, and he's going to be coming in and helping with some of those drawing aspects for you. So that'll be happening in a few weeks' time. I've just in here, we've got our semester one. Oh, that's the building approval. Excuse me. So back to that, and then go back. Bring up planning approval first. Okay, so we don't have Andreas written in here yet, because I was organising with him just the other day about when he can come in and help out. But I'm expecting that it will be fairly early on, possibly in week 2. He'll be able to be in to help out with some of the drawing aspects. So to help us navigate around, well, actually, before we really get into our program and our schedule, I'd like to have a quick discussion about planning and building approval. So is there anybody in this class, actually I guess Congo, you would have had a bit of experience now with planning and building approval through your work at Rivergum. So you've done planning approval submissions.
Yeah, that's right.
And
The first stage is just like planning approval. We need to submit to council to how the appearance of the building, and council will look at how you want to present for this project. Just the artwork,
yeah,
not exactly the structure and other things.
yeah,
And when the council approval your planning, and the next stage we get to the building approval. And after the building approval is about maybe something about the structure things. And the next stage is working drawings. All go to the down until the project finish.
yeah, yeah, and in your office, have you done some of the planning and building approval submissions all in the one go? Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And have you done any staged approvals in
Yes,
there?
I just finished 2 planning approval. Actually, in River Campos, they got a different group.
Yeah,
One group is dealing with council.
yeah,
They got all the documents prepared and submitted to the council.
yeah,
For the designing group, you only prepare the drawing. You
yeah.
don't have prepared the RQ documentations the council need. So also the third group is for the framing group. They just cooperating the side work.
Yeah.
That's it. So we got different job.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah, they
office is
put
split up.
together. Yeah, the
Yeah,
office cooperation. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And have you had any dealings with Res Code?
Resco.
Res Code through your office there?
No.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll get into that a little bit. Is there anybody else who's had a bit of an insight into the planning and building approval process through work? Also, so yeah, pretty like Congo gave a really good overview of what planning and building approval is. First up, so it's about basically it's the bulk of the work for drafters. That's pretty much why architectural drafters are required. Yes, certainly plans are incredibly important for when you're building a house. It's a way of communicating information to builders and getting that all down. But the primary step is for getting that approval through council, and then once you've gotten that approval through council, you're able to gain insurance for the building. You'll be able to borrow money against it, because obviously, if we don't have an insurer wanting to insure the building, we probably don't have a bank wanting to lend money to building that building. That's the two main considerations essentially that drive why people would want to get planning and building approval. The other main consideration is that we have it's an act of Parliament, an act of state government that, well, that's the Development Act of Development Act 1996. That states that all building work must, or there are exempt developments from that, but all building work must have approval from council, and that enables council, or gives council, the ability to put an order in to say that people cannot occupy a premise that was built without planning and or building approval, and also that they can, in very extreme cases, go in there and remove structures that haven't had approval, and that has happened.
My brother-in-law works in council.
Right.
And the amount of people that just do stupid stuff like building their fences and stuff slightly out of line, which then causes drainage, because there's been an area which has been set which isn't allowed to have any building on it, because just in case water companies or whatever, they have to come in and fix it.
Yeah.
And people have just built their fences and stuff straight over it, and they've just had to come out, remove the whole thing.
Yeah. So what you touched on just there is it's about easements. So yeah, there are various different parties that have interests in property, and we'll get into that a little bit. But that is a major one. Drainage is a big one for councils. Water flowing from one person's property onto another person's property is quite often cause of conflict. So loud dogs, and rubbish disposal as well, and collection of things around the house. Also, so big hassle for councils. But yes, water flowing from one property to another cause structural issues to people's houses. It can cause flooding, etc. And so that's a big one for councils. So in saying that, it's very important when you're doing site plans, and we'll go into our various different plans and so on later. When you're doing site plans, show the council where your water is going. They don't specifically mention that on their websites typically, but councils want to know what's happening with your water. Once it comes off of your roof through the downpipes, where is it going to go? And typically what they want to hear is that the water is running to the street water table. So that's where it goes to the gutters and then goes into the stormwater system that's managed by the local council. As we get our urban area built up more and more and more, stormwater and the discharge into the streets is becoming a problem in some areas where we've got a lot of discharge, a lot of rainfall intensity. So as you get to the hills here, where the clouds are hitting the hills, you get a little bit more rainfall, higher rainfall intensity, and more runoff from buildings and paved areas, etc. And so there are some councils, like Mitcham Council, Tea Tree Gully Council, who are also requiring now that you put in detention and retention tanks. So a retention tank, that's where you keep water for your own use on the property. Detention tank is where you detain it for a small amount of time. Typically what people are doing is putting in the one tank and having an outlet further up the tank with a small like flow restricting device. Yeah, it's an overflow system, but it's an overflow system that doesn't overflow very quickly. So
very often.
Yeah. So actually, well, I'll give you a bit of a pictorial idea of what that is. So, you know, our tank like that, we'll have an outlet here for general use. So that would go to the pump for use in the garden, etc., toilets possibly. Then halfway up the house, half up the tank, another outlet with a restricting device on it that only allows a little trickle of water to come out, or like a small hose, a small amount of water to come out at a time. Large rainfall event, tank fills up, and then over half an hour or so, it just trickles out. So rather than have all that water rushing into the street when you also have the rainfall event and all that other water on the street, it's detained for a short amount of time. So it grabs all that water that happens in the storm event and then trickles out over time. But this bit you can use on your gardens and things like that. And then, over the summertime, obviously that gets depleted. Yeah, Levi. What's that?
How big are they?
How big are they? That depends on the council, and it depends on the land size, typically. So
And the fire rating.
and the fire rating, yeah, and we'll get into that as well. For those of you that had me for materials and methods certificate 4, or for some of it's something we've brought in just recently. It's about the on-site water for firefighting purposes. Has everybody? I think everybody's done that with me, haven't they? Wrong you. Did you have me for recently for certificate 4 materials and methods? Yeah. So I'll have to go. But is everybody else familiar with that? Levi? Oh, actually no. I had you a bit earlier, didn't I? What's that? For certificate 4 materials and methods, I think. Yeah, but I had you for that, but we didn't have the dedicated water for firefighting at that point. No, we didn't. So yeah, no, that's another one as well. How do I say it? It gets missed quite a bit in planning approval submissions, and councils are going back to people who are doing their submissions and saying, look, you've got to have this dedicated water for firefighting purposes as well. So we'll go through that for everybody who hasn't. Richard,
I did it with
yeah.
Dave last year.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so yeah. So you had that.
My knowledge of it came more from compliance.
Oh yes.
Which we had to do around the BAL, the bushfire attack.
Yes. Yeah.
We had to match that to properties and then fix what was wrong.
Yeah.
So that's where my knowledge comes from.
Okay. Yeah. And Levi, but you haven't been through that process. Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. So we'll get on to that. We'll go through that a little bit as well. So yeah, planning building approval. What is it? Who is involved? Well, first up, mostly the council are involved in both the planning and building approval, but not only the council. And what do they need to know? Well, as Commonwealth said earlier, the planning approval is about what the building is going to look like. And so that's going to take into effect things like ridge heights, dimensions of the building, where it's set on the allotment, what sort of materials it's going to be using, what sort of colours of materials it's going to be using. Any other aspects people can think of the council would want to know about a building?
They want to driveway allotment spaces.
Yeah.
That then has to go back to drainage along the front of the street.
Yeah. So there's that impact on drainage, but then they also want to ensure that people aren't going to be designing houses that don't allow for off-street parking as well. So they're going to have requirements that you have off-street parking and that you have decent access to your property, that you don't have a very skinny driveway coming out from a place where you've got no visibility onto a major arterial road. They're going to be concerned about these sorts of things, and they want people to be able to have adequate turnaround space within their allotments, particularly for major roads, so they can enter forwards, turn around, and exit forwards as well. But yeah, so they want to ensure that they don't have people being forced to park on the street, that they can, and that's been a vein of contention for some of the projects I've been involved in, where the nature of the project is about sustainable living and people not relying so much on cars, yet the councils are saying, well, look, you still have to have these car parking spaces, despite the fact that you're doing a design around that. But also in that, councils want to know that there's going to be access for emergency services vehicles as well, for ambulances, for firefighters, etc. And when we get to the CFS, so the bushfire attack levels and the minister's specification 78, that touches on both those on-site water requirements and on the access requirements as well. So, for planning approval, obviously the first one we're thinking about is the local council. So we're going to have to find out who the local council is. Now, as you get into it, you're going to find that there is some commonality between councils. With your residential areas, you're going to go, Burnside Council are saying the same thing as Norwood, Palem, St Peters, who are saying the same thing as Mitcham here. They're all, and you'll find a lot of these commonalities. But what you will also find are little differences between the councils. That does get a little bit confusing, and it is essentially it's a massive thing that there'll always be more learning as you go. As you get into it further and further, you'll realise and you'll start to get your head around what the commonalities are and what you can just simply expect a council to say, and then you'll also get to learn what are the veins of contention for those specific councils and what they want in those certain areas. So in regards to the commonalities, to help, so it's something it's been in place since 2013, and it's getting used more and more, is a thing called Res Code. Now I've put an information sheet up onto the Learn site this morning about Res Code. Basically, that's a fast tracking process through the planning approval process, because there are a lot of commonalities when it comes to residential development to enable or to reduce some of the frustration and reduce the documentation and time required to get approvals for simple residential projects. Res Code has been set up. It's also now I'm not entirely sure in the intent but behind all of this, but it also seems to be a very good segue into what we're likely to be seeing in the future for planning approval. There are big moves, big changes afoot at the moment. We've got a new Planning Act as of 2016, which spawns new development regulations that will start to be coming into effect in 2020. However, there's not a great deal of, how to say it, there's not a great deal of processes that have been formalised in regards to that yet. So that's still very much a work in progress. But the general theme of that is it's to deregulate a little the planning process, to enable members or individuals to be certified to make planning decisions autonomously of councils. So just like a private certifier, and we'll go into private certifiers later, there is likely going to be that facility for you to go to people who are like a private certifier for getting your planning approval. So you can take your stuff to them rather than take it to the council. That's the main sort of theme of the new regulations that are coming through. And Res Code is like a little, in a sense, a stepping stone toward that sort of model. So some of the things that you'll be learning in this, throughout this process are going to change in the next few years. Exactly what they're going to change to, we don't know. Really nobody. Well, I guess there are a few people that probably do have a very good idea, but the majority of us don't know what's exactly how it's all going to play out as yet. So it's a space to watch. So as mentioned before, so there's an Act of Parliament that gives council the power to be making these decisions and imposing their development plans on the community to ensure that there's a standard and there's a rhyme and a reason to the development that we have in our urban area. And then that Development Act spawns the development regulations. Building approval, once again, local council are involved in the building approval. So they're ultimately the body that makes that decision, that signs, that gives that building approval, that enables the builder to go ahead. But increasingly now, or the vast majority of projects go through what is called a private certifier. Private certifier costs you small projects around $500 and up. From there, they handle all of the building rules consent for the council. So rather than the council having staff to make all these decisions about, does this building meet the code, does it meet the National Construction Code, does it meet the Australian standards, does it meet the various ministers' specifications and reference handbooks, etc. You can employ a private certifier. The benefit for the drafters and the designers of employing a private certifier is they are working for you. So you'll get your information to them. They can go through that and they go, oh, there's this bit, and there's this bit, and there's this bit that you need to touch up on. That's a far more efficient system than putting stuff into council, waiting 6 to 8 weeks, and then getting an answer back saying it doesn't comply, and then the information stops at that. So they're essentially working for you, and they can speed up the process. So to get
would builders use private certifiers?
Builders would use private certifiers if they're applying for planning and building approval. Yes, so some builders do a lot of their own designs and their own submissions. Yeah, at times we have a separation between our drafters, building designers, architects, and builders. Other times, yeah, they're all in one. Yeah, but also principally for builders, if they want to have on-site advice about compliance issues, they're typically going to be a member of Master Builders or HIA who have those on-call services that they can phone up and say, hey, look, we've got this really weird issue, we've got these plans, not sure whether this is compliant or not, and they can get that information on site about those. So typically the private certifier is more for the building designer, drafter, architect who's lodging those plans. So the private certifier, they are going to assess everything against the National Construction Code. Now, yeah, so National Construction Code, very weighty document, and it's not just the National Construction Code, but it's the referenced Australian standards. Has everybody seen at the start of the National Construction Code, because I assume everybody has now accessed the National Construction Code. Hands up if you're not very familiar with the National Construction Code.
And BCA, if you don't know it, it's the NCC.
Oh yes, the BCA yeah. So everybody's familiar with the National Construction, or to a degree. Like I'm not expecting everybody to to rattle off clauses, etc., and nuances. But at the start of the National Construction Code, well, we've got two volumes that we're primarily concerned with: Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 deals with commercial buildings, Class 2 through to 9 buildings. So we're in a Class 9 building here. Your Class 2 buildings, your multi-residential. Your Class 3 are your hotels. Your Class 4 are your residences within an office block. Class 5 offices. Class 6 retail. 7 manufacturing, car parking, etc. Class 8 institutions and Class 9 institutional buildings as well, but primarily high density, so residential aged care, schools, etc. So you've got your class, so your volume 1 for all of those commercial classes, all the classes that will require greater fire separation requirements, greater safety and signage and access for people with disabilities. So more stringent requirements there and more interesting situations. But we also have volume 2 that covers all of your more standard residential applications. So for your detached houses, for attached houses that don't have any other residences above them, so row houses, things like that, they come in as a class 1 building under volume 2, and so do your sheds, carports, swimming pools, retaining walls, that sort of thing. They come in under class 10. So they're all grouped together in your volume 2. At the start of each of these volumes, and let me know if you haven't seen it, there is a list of referenced Australian standards. Well, has everybody seen that list of referenced Australian standards? So that's a really good guide as to what Australian standards you've got to get to know. That's not where we stop when it comes to compliance. That's the bulk of it. So we've got our National Construction Code, we've got the Australian standards that it references, and it says you have to do this, if you're going to go the deemed to satisfy route, you have to do this, etc., through those Australian standards. But there are also referenced handbooks. So we've got a handbook for masonry, we've got a handbook for roof plumbing, drainage and sheeting. Not sure off the top of my head what the other handbooks are. So they're also referenced by the National Construction Code. But the tricky one is, the thing that keeps changing are the minister's specifications. So we have ministers for various different portfolios, some of which relate to building and constructions. And they will, from time to time, see a need for additional regulation of things that's not specifically covered within the National Construction Code. So the National Construction Code, it's, as the name implies, it's national. It covers the whole nation, but we've got some things here specific in South Australia that or the government will say, look, yeah, this is really important. We can't get together the whole country to organise this, but we'll make a directive to say this is the way we need to deal with things. A very important one for you, and one that Richard alluded to earlier, is what's called Specification 78, where you have to have certain requirements for CFS access and on-site water. Other minister specifications are, there's one called F1.7. That's now been incorporated within the new National Construction Code, or the current one. I'll speak about that in a minute. So when I say current, I'm talking about 2016. We've got a National Construction Code 2019. That will be coming out towards the end of this semester. So it's up for draft at the moment. You can have a look at it. You can have a look at the changes, etc. It's not formalised yet. We'll be referring to this one as the current. So 2016 is current, but by all means, toward the end of the semester, get your teeth into any of those changes. But within the 2016, there are the updated wet area requirements for South Australia only. So there's a difference between the national requirements for wet areas and the requirements for SA. So that comes about as a result of a minister's specification. So the minister will have a minister's code, and then specifications will arise out of that. So some specific things for South Australia, for example, are slopes to floors. So within the general area of a bathroom, it's 1:80 minimum, whereas nationally it's 1:100. Within a shower, it's 1:60, whereas nationally it's 1:80. So in South Australia, we need steeper floors, as opposed to nationally. There's also the thing that in South Australia it includes kitchens and bar areas. That's something that's included nationally, and also you've got to do water-resistant sections behind a washing machine. That's something specific to South Australia that's not national. They're mentioned in the National Construction Code, and when we get into wet areas and waterproofing, I'll show you where these are. But that can be a little bit of a trick to find where it speaks specifically about South Australia. Because if you go through the National Construction Code, you work your way through and goes, oh yes, and it's referencing AS 3740 for wet areas, blah blah blah, and I'll do all my stuff, put it in. It might, or it should bounce back from council. Because there are some South Australian specific areas that are buried in there. So, what information is required for planning? So, building features. So, the general community, I guess they have a bit of a stake in what you do. Well, a lot of people think they should. A lot of people like to move to an area and I guess get a bit of an idea of what they're going to be living with. Actually, and that's one thing I didn't chuck on the slides in terms. And we'll get a little bit more into encumbrances and things later. But it's not just the council that says what your building's allowed to look like. Developers do the same thing as well. So if I was, actually, who did the development at Golden Grove? Can anybody remember? Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know if it was Delphin or whoever. Yeah, bit longer. Anyhow, if I was to go carving up another Golden Grove, so I'm a major developer doing a major development, one thing I would do is put in, well, I'm not speaking personally, but this is what developers do, they put in encumbrances. So on your certificate of title, there is a statement lodged on that certificate of title that says you have to meet this particular building encumbrance, and then those encumbrances will be detailed elsewhere to say that you have to have colour-bond fencing to 1.8 metres high. And those colour-bond colours have to be these sorts of colours. Or they'll say you have to have a tiled roof or a sheet roof. You have to have brick veneer or rendered external. And they'll list all of these things to say this is what we want that suburb to look like. Now there are definitely pros and cons in that. There are, and probably by the very nature of you guys studying drafting and or building design, you're probably a little bit more inclined to unique buildings and getting interesting stuff happen. But there is also quite a contingent within the public that want a lot of homogeneity in building, that like to have a suburb to be predictable. And so that's why builders will impose these encumbrances on those titles when they're doing a development, so that people can buy in knowing that the buildings are going to be built to a certain aesthetic standard. So we have those building encumbrances autonomous of government, autonomous of any regulation. Those developers can impose those encumbrances. However, typically a lot of those encumbrances are sorted out and negotiated with councils as well to ensure that the encumbrances that are imposed are in keeping with what the council wants that area as well, because the council have to yeah.
Because the development plan also has the desired character and
Yes.
that has to meet it.
Yes, so it has to meet with the development plan. So yeah, but they'll have their encumbrances which are a little bit above and beyond what's specified in the development plan. But certainly council still have to approve those subdivisions, and they're going to want to, or the developer's going to want to know that the council approves on that basis their encumbrances. So, what information is required for planning approval? Building features. So, what the building's going to look like? You know, how far it's set back, etc. And whether it's going to meet sort of heritage requirements. I used to live on a street that was the first part of the street. If you were going to get any planning approval done in that first section of the street, you had to it basically had to be like a Federation villa. That's the only thing you'd be able to get through council for that first part. Second part of the street, it was a little bit more free for all, and because there was, I guess the first part of the street was developed around 1905 through to 1915, so before World War One. The second bit was developed later, and there's more more variation in building types and styles and architectural houses going in, etc. And so, so on that one street, you had different zones in which you could be doing different things, and you'll probably you may see that sort of thing around where you live or in your local community as well. So there are areas where you do have to meet or fit in with that historic character or a certain aesthetic, a height, setback, etc. Size. So councils are going to have a say in how large a building can be, how much of that allotment it can take up. It's another thing for the public in general. People say, oh look, I want to live in a suburb where people have gardens. I don't want to be in a place where it's wall to wall, no gardens, etc. Or other people will say, no, we want high population density, we want vibrancy, we want lots of people here. So it's so often those things are two competing ideas. Councils want to manage that, or they will have to manage that through their development plan and the zonings imposed in their development plan. So they're going to want to know about the size of your building, how much of the allotment that's taking up, how much private open space that allows. They're going to want to know about materials. If I'm building up in the hills in what's called a flame zone, so we've got your bushfire attack levels of low, medium, high, and flame zone. If I'm building up in flame zone or even in a high, there are certain materials I will not be able to use. Actually, even in medium, there are certain materials you will not be able to use on your building. So fire safety is going to play into that. But also, if we think back at heritage, that can dictate certain materials that you can use, or even certain building approaches. We had a building in North Adelaide. We had to reinstate a veranda slab. We weren't allowed to use mesh or put any control joints into that slab because it had to crack in a random fashion as it would have if it was done in 1890. So, there are various constraints around what you can do in regards to heritage, or there are various allowances in regards to heritage. So what councils typically don't like are really shiny materials like galv and zinc aluminum. They don't, and they especially don't, like any of the councils that have hill space zone, they don't want you putting a large zinc aluminum shed where everybody from down the city can see this large zinc aluminum shed glowing there in the evening when the sun's setting, etc. But in many other places, they don't really like galv and zinc aluminum. They want colour-on colours that are natural, that sort of fit into the natural environment. An exception to that is in some of the more historic areas where councils will be quite happy for you to use things like galv. You know, if that's matched with timber and so on, it gives that traditional aesthetic. So, yeah, so some of the historic areas will allow certain things and allow it elsewhere. Other things about materials. Oh, okay, another fire safety, a big one that keeps evolving. Every time I look at it is combustible claddings. So it's a big thing that's not going away. There was a lot of combustible claddings put on primarily large buildings. I noticed maybe about 2 weeks ago that well, I was only looking on one council website, but they now have a requirement that if you are going to be using an aluminium sandwich panel cladding on a building, you have to make a submission to council detailing its use. I can't remember their terminology about that, but it refers back, or they get their permission to do so back from the Development Act. For that's right. It's called a designated building material. So there's certain building materials now that you have to provide documentation for, and they're called designated building materials. Aluminium sandwich panel is one of those. And so if you're going to be, doing a very interesting modern architectural house with an aluminium sandwich panel cladding facade, council will probably want to know about that. Building use. So once again, that goes back. Well, it goes back to the National Construction Code, but also it's primarily tied in with the zoning. One of the major reasons why we have zoning within our cities is to ensure that we don't have things like heavy and polluting industries right next to residences. So it was a thing back in the early days of subdivision and development of Adelaide that Bowden and Brompton were areas of heavy industry that had pollution and so on. Well, even where we are now, we're just nearby. There's a tetraethyl chloride or something like that made its way into the water here from metal polishing things that I'm not sure that happened within the actual Onslow site. Might have been elsewhere here. I'm not exactly sure where. But councils want to ensure that those things are separated, that we don't have major pollutants happening where we have people residing. But they also want to ensure that there's not too much noise disturbance. So in regards to environment, it's not only pollutants which are a real problem, but noise as well. And that's a difficult thing for, say, inner city councils to deal with. They're juggling multi-residential developments next to established music venues, etc. And so there's things for the councils to work out in concert with liquor licensing, etc. But they're going to want to separate these things as much as possible, because what they don't want is a lot of hassle from residents. They don't want residents saying, yeah, this guy keeps burning car tyres and whatever next to our place, or is dumping asbestos, or doing all these sorts of things near our house. Or they also don't want people phoning up and saying, that music venue is way too loud, it's keeping us up all night, etc. So they're going to want that separation. However, you've also got it comes under Salisbury Council, I think, for Mawson Lakes development, where it's sort of going against the grain of that initial idea of keep everything separate, to bring things together, to go back to that model where you have residences above shops, for example. Things like that. It's called the multifunction policy, to get some of these things happening again, because there are benefits in that as well. And some people really like that lifestyle of being amongst it, and it's good to be able to provide all these options for various different people and how they want to live, whether it's the large allotment for cricket in the backyard, or the townhouse above a shop. So council's going to weigh into that, and so with your submission, they've got to want to know what that building is used for. Now, typically that's going to be fairly obvious from the plans as supplied, but you're going to have that information, or that's got to be readily discernible by your submission. They're also going to want to know, so the relationship to the street and community and adjoining development. So I sort of touched on that a little bit before in terms of historic development, but it's not just about historic development. It's about things like setbacks. In the inner city, they want to ensure that people approaching the city see that this is the city, that all your walls line up, that this is a densely built area. We are a successful commercial, hub. They want to create that feeling, that atmosphere. Within a residential street, they want to have some homogeneity, some rhythm of those building frontages as well. So people drive down the street and go, okay, they've got some front yards that these houses are doing the same thing. That there's not houses right up against the street. There's not houses really far back. They want to have that sort of rhythm as well, and they'll want to have at least some sort of continuity of height and massing of buildings as well. So we don't have tiny little houses, really big houses. Personally, I don't. I think that that difference can be nice, etc. But in the main, that's what councils want to achieve. And they also, relationship with street and community, things like fences, etc. Some councils will want to have higher fences for certain areas to block out noise and things like that on major roads. Others will want to have small fences, have it open, have that visual connection, create that community through social interactions by unrelated people or people who are neighbours living close by. So council are going to want to know about that. And then what information is required for building? So Consul put it fairly well earlier to say it's about that building fabric, it's about how it's built. So how it complies with the National Construction Code. So either the council or the private certifier are going to want to see, okay, does that meet the National Construction Code, or where it doesn't meet the National Construction Code, has it been engineered to a standard and engineered by a professional that has experience and insurance to deal with that. So for example, not all of your structural engineers will have insurance for doing slabs. So footings and slabs, very expensive. Well, if it goes wrong, it's an incredibly expensive thing to rectify. Has everybody been seen on the news about the Opal Tower development in Sydney? Everybody? No? Some? No. Google it. Have a look. It's there hasn't been too much information flowing out from that, but basically it was there's a multitude of errors as far as I can understand. Incorrect boxing out for concrete, incorrect concrete coverage, wrong steel used, precast panels cast with the reinforcing on the wrong side, or the wrong placement within the concrete panels, incorrect grout, and possibly other factors like speed of construction, loading of concrete elements before they've reached their design strength, all this sort of thing. So there probably more information is going to be coming out about that development, but incredibly expensive and incredibly problematic as a result of mistakes made along the way, and engineers not inspecting at key stages and not inspecting thoroughly. So councils have got to, I keep saying councils. Typically, there's one council I've had a bit of dealings with just recently. They don't have anybody on staff anymore that does this building compliance, that will assess things for building rules consent. They send all their stuff to private certifiers anyhow, because the bulk of drafters, designers are sending their stuff to private certifiers. It's not really worth them to have a full-time member of staff who's doing this assessment. So if you choose not to go through a private certifier, you go through the council. It'll go to the private certifier anyhow. So I keep referring to councils, but typically that's the way things are going. So you've got certified, but they're going to want to know, are these things either taking a deemed to satisfy approach through the National Construction Code, or have they been sufficiently and correctly engineered by competent persons to do that? Then they're going to want to know, okay, does it meet the Australian standards? Australian standards, well, typically it's Australian standards that are referenced by the National Construction Code, but not always. There's one Australian standard, AS 4440, about the installation of roof trusses. There's no mention of that in the National Construction Code. But try getting a building with a truss roof through that doesn't meet AS 4440. It's not going to happen. So there are Australian standards like that that you have to comply with, even not referenced by the National Construction Code. And then, yeah, we mentioned minister's specifications there before, and that's probably a decent segue into, there's another, I think it came about as a result of a minister's specification, I'm fairly sure, that when you're building a building with a trussed roof, that it's called Regulation 74, that you have to have that trussed roof signed off by somebody who has their certification for roof framing. Levo, you probably know a little bit more about that, do you? Or sorry to put you on the spot. A little bit, not much. Yeah, you didn't delve into it because you were working for a carpenter, or yeah. What's that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that carpenter you were working for, did they have their certification for doing structural roof framing? Yeah, they did. Yeah, so they would have. Yeah, and that's typically going to be the case. I think you're not going to have that many carpenters that don't go out there to do, or to be able to sign off on on the roof framing declaration. So they're all going to want to do that certification to do that, so they can go putting in roof trusses. But yeah, but that was as a result, I think, of a minister's specification saying that we can't just treat roof framing like any other framing. It's load bearing. It's highly important. You need to have a statement to say that roof framing complies with Regulation 74, and all the trusses have been installed as per AS 4440. So the minister's getting in there with that one as well. And then, yeah, once again, engineering details. So your certifiers or people on council are going to want to see those engineering details and ensure that it has been engineered adequately. And then after all that process, and it gets through the council, etc., then it goes on to the builder. Builder has to make sure of all these things once again as well. So that's our planning and building approval in a nutshell. Now there's going to be a lot more to learn about the process as we go through, but the reason we teach it as planning approval and building approval is because, yes, you can apply for planning approval when you apply for building approval, as what happens with very simple developments, but you can also stage it. You can apply for planning approval, you can apply for building approval separately. Instances where you would want to separate those two is where you're not sure that you're going to get planning approval. You don't want to go through the whole process of, let's say we're building a really interesting, highly engineered building in a very conservative sort of area. We're not going to be wanting to shell out thousands of dollars for engineering details, work through all of the architectural details and the flow of the building and all this sort of stuff. Spend $30,000 on an architect to work through all of this stuff if we don't know that it's going to get planning approval, Because if it doesn't get planning approval, then it's back to the drawing board again. We don't want to go through that process. So in some instances, we'll want to separate planning approval. Get that planning approval first, know that we can build the building as we've designed, and then get all the engineering details all worked out and get that sorted. So, any questions on all of that? Sorry, I've just been going flat out through, but is that making a fair bit of sense to everyone? So there's a lot there's a lot to take in. We've got a whole semester in which to work through that process. And so on that, what we have on the Learn page is our semester 1 learning program. Let's say no. Here we go. Don't show me that message again. Thanks. So yeah. Week 1. Oh, it's got work health and safety. So I'll have to go through a bit of work health and safety stuff as well. Now, all of you are students who are continuing on. I'm sure you do know the location of toilets, etc. That you've seen the evacuation plans on the pillars outside the doors, showing you where to go. We have alarms that will tell you if there is an incident what you need to do. Is there anybody who hasn't done any internal study here before? Right. Due dates, incredibly important in this subject. Some of you have had me before. Look, I can be, typically previously in other subjects, I can be a little bit more flexible. Understand you've got work commitments, things like that. I can be flexible if I know, okay, you're working on it, you're doing your stuff, you're having a busy period. I'm typically fine with that. With this subject, I can't really extend any of that to you. The reason for that, it is flat out. It's one thing after another. If you have that mindset of going, oh, well, look, I'll just do it later, I'll push it back a bit, because we've got, well, for the planning and for people doing planning and building approval, because you've got 42 tasks to hand up within 18 weeks, if something's kicked, down the road to the next week, it's bunching up already at that point in time. And so with this subject, we've got to be really on top of due dates. It's got to be things handed up and working to the program. So well, look, there's a whole bunch of things you're going to have to do, but one very important thing is probably print off a copy of that program. And or maybe I can do that for you in the break as well. I'll get through printing, and there's not many of you. Get to know that program really well. Work to that program, because you're going to have to, because it goes flat out. And that is also the way that it works within the office as well. You got deadlines. Things have to go to people at a certain time. People are not very happy with delays. Delays in construction are incredibly expensive. Delays to people seeking planning approval, well, can be a little bit more frustrating than expensive. But when you've got trades on site, trades booked in, they're waiting for you, and there are delays, it can be phenomenally expensive. Or if you go over your time for a building project, it can get phenomenally expensive as well, because when you get toward the end of that building process, when all the progress payments have been paid out, there's a lot of money being paid to financing that project without any return. If you've got delays, that can horrendously expensive. We've really got to set the ground rules within this subject, because it's the one that you're doing before you're getting out there. Due dates. Gone through that. What's planning approval? Why do we need planning approval? Access to the National Construction Code, Australian standards, and development plans. Is everybody here actually? Well, since since we've got the externals watching this as well, I should go through access to the National Construction Code. Does everybody here have access to the National Construction Code? Is that a yes? Or? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Richard?
I'll have to find out again. So
All right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, as long as you can remember your log. Okay. Yeah. As a basic yes, you'll download a copy of the National Construction Code and have that as a PDF that you carry around with you. You're going to look at this document a lot, and you're going to be pulling bits and pieces out. Some of it directed by me, some of it self-directed. So you're going to have to be looking at this at night, at any time, outside of class, getting to know your way through it. See if there's something in there that I'm not bringing to your attention. Now, obviously, I've got to be bringing the bulk of things to your attention, and that's another thing. For those of you who are doing building approval as well, there's an aspect of that subject where what I have to do is I have to withhold some tiny little bits of information from you, because also what's a requirement of that subject is that you do a resubmission to council, that you have something bounce back from council. So there are going to be some tiny things, some little nuances in the National Construction Code that I won't tell you about, and that you go through the whole process, and then I'll go, oh yeah, but that doesn't meet code, that little thing. So there's going to be that. But beyond those little things, there's going to be other aspects that you're going to have to independently work through and find, because you're going to have to make references to those specific sections on your plans. So quickly, just have a look at access to the National Construction Code. That is done through the ABCB site, so the Australian Building Codes Board. The ABCB. Click on that. And then this little one here that doesn't say anything, that's for your login. Get to that. So for those of you who have already set up your login, what you do is you put in your email and your password. So really cool thing, National Construction Code, well obviously it's free. Everybody's got access to the National Construction Code now. When I was studying, you didn't. You had to go to the library, and there was a couple of copies in the library. When you went out beyond TAFE, you no longer had access to that National Construction Code. It was $500 to buy a copy. It's a lovely thing that it's been made free now. What is currently not free for it's free for you guys to access, and by all means use it as much as you can while you're here at the TAFE, is access to Australian standards. However, I heard that there are also movements afoot for allowing free access to the Australian standards for everybody as well. Yeah, but that's only advice. Let's call that a rumour. But in the near future, that may be, but don't rely on that. Get your access to the Australian standards via the TAFE. But once we've logged in here, then we've got our drop-down menu here next to NCC, and we've got our NCC suite. So that's going to have your Volume 1, your Volume 2, and your Volume 3. So Volume 1 and Volume 2, that's the one that we're going to be referring to. Our Volume 3, that's for plumbers and electricians. You've also got you've got various guides to the volumes as well. So this is sorry, we've got also don't be confused, we've got the 2019 preview up here as well. Get the 2016. We have to work to the 2016. 2019 has not yet been adopted. there may be changes, etc. Our current one is still 2016. But you have, oh yeah, we got the complete series. Download that. But yeah, we've got some previews and guides to 2019. But also, you've got various other publications on the website here as well that help you understand various aspects of the National Construction Code. Give you a bit of an overview of it as well. So have a look around, have a bit of an explore through the site, and there are also where are we? There are also other resources available on the NCC site as well, such as educational resources and things like that. Some fact sheets and some explanations of things. Yeah, exactly where they are again, I'm not sure. Yeah, I won't go through that, but have a bit of an explore around the site in your own time. The Australian standards, we've got access to those via the library. Has everybody accessed those Australian standards through the library yet? Richard? Yeah.
I have before.
Have before? Yeah. Gotta get back into it. So that's another thing. Yeah, you've got to be doing that a lot for this subject, accessing Australian standards. And yeah, look, for the common ones, for the ones you're going to keep referring back to, print them as a PDF. Have them there in your file, so you can just keep grabbing them rather than having to go on to that Australian Standards site all the time, because you're going to have to be referring to them. You're going to have to be cutting some sections out for various different things. So that's available through. So we've got services and libraries. Was so go to login, and while we're here, can everybody have a go at logging in to the library here today while we're here today? So through the TAFE site, go to services and library. So the library page, go to library catalogue. So click on library catalogue. Oh, blocked by TAFE, so that's lovely. Okay, so yeah, so is everybody having the same? So everybody's having the same issue. Okay. All right. Well, gonna have to find out what the there's look, it is so often there are issues with access to things right in this first week as students are getting re-registered in and so on. So not sure exactly what's happening there. What's that?
Only happened on the weekend.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then same thing happens. Yeah, to staff. As new logins are created for new semesters and things like that. So we do have a bit of a transition period at the start. Okay, so that's good. Well, I guess it's good that we tried that out. We know, okay, people don't have access to that at the moment. You won't need access to it this week, I don't think, but we're going to have to sort access to it. If we can't sort access to those Australian standards, I'll be supplying you with what's really important initially as we need it, but we're going to have to get access to the library. Anyhow, when you do, you get into here.
The library access login, use your date of birth.
Yes.
Day, month.
Yes.
Yeah, just give me.
Okay.
Yeah, login.
Yeah.
I already logged in my library.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that, yeah.
the password is your day, month. Yeah.
Okay. So as Congo was saying, so the library login, you're going to have, the password is going to be your birthday, so the 2 digits of the day and the 2 digits of the month. So have a go at that. And
They won't let you into it.
Christian won't, won't even let you get there.
Computer says no.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Right. Is there anybody else who's been denied access? Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah. You got in? Yeah.
Your user ID is your number, you take student ID,
Take student number.
and then your day and month.
That's
Why they changed it so
Yeah, mine went through, yeah.
it was wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
You used to be able to get that from your actual source itself, you just go to learn.
Yeah.
Go to here and then it'd be on the right hand side.
Yeah.
You just get them from there.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Systems change. Yeah. Perpetually, better or worse. Yeah. Yeah. So student ID, and then your password, day, your birth date, so day, month, and then you get to this area here, and when you're there, click back onto home, and you click onto this section here, online resources. So databases, online resources, and there you can, there we go. Oh, yeah. Gee, things are continuously changing, aren't they? So click on Australian Standards, SAI Global, and it will take you to this page where you can search the Australian standards. So, well, let's find an Australian standard. So AS 3740. Yeah. So that's one that you're going to, both planning and building approval, you're going to get to know this one. That's waterproofing of domestic wet areas. Click on it, it takes a while. I'll double click on it. And then I go straight to open document.
Just got to remember that there's only 3 licenses.
Oh yes, that's another thing. So FAO Global only can take 3 licenses as well. Toward the end of the semester, it gets busy, and there'll be students, other students that are on there at the same time. If you don't get access first time you click on it, try again. But as I said before, there are going to be Australian standards that you're going to refer to again and again and again and again. Keep a copy of it, rather than having to go in there. I don't want you guys getting to that night before submission, something you've got to do. You know, I've said no, look, you have to do this as per blah blah blah, and then you don't have access to it. Much of this subject is about that organisation. It's about file storage. It's about collating all that information, putting it in places where you're going to find it, and also putting it in places where, or storing it in a manner where you've got backups. So if something goes horribly wrong, as it often does, you can refer to where you've got it saved elsewhere. And we'll talk a little bit more about that file storage later. But there you go. So that's the Australian standard. I assume everybody in this room has seen an Australian standard and can work your way through. Yeah. So yeah, within the wet areas one, we've got, I'll get down to our contents page, go to page 5. You know, falls in floor finishes, etc. As I mentioned before, South Australia is a little bit different there. You're going to have to refer to the National Construction Code for that. Yeah, all your various different sections, but then you're going to go possibly Appendix C, extent of waterproofing. See some details, see some drawings of what sections have to be waterproof, what sections have to be water resistant in what scenario. So a diagrammatic representation of all of these things. And go back. And search for another Australian standard. So that's our access to the Australian standards. You're going to have, or you're going to be, or hopefully by the end of this, you're going to be very familiar with that. And development plans. Has everybody accessed a development plan before? Yep. Yep. So we can access it either directly from the council's website or from the Planning SA website as well. Either way. Once again, like the Australian standards and the National Construction Code, you're going to get to know development plans very well, and that's what we're starting off with. So you're going to have several projects, and you're going to have to look up the zoning for those projects, and then get to know both the zoning and the overriding council objectives for those. Yeah, you smile now.
Yeah, as non-descriptive as they are.
Oh, exactly. And I'll go a little bit into the nuances of those throughout today's session. Are you guys about ready for a bit of a breather and a stretch or so, or keep pushing on? Am I maintaining your interest, or did you want to have a quick breather? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take 5. Let's come back at 11:45, and we'll get back into it because we're going through to 1 o'clock. And yeah, starting on development plans, it will be meaty. All right. So it's recording. Okay. So back into it. So yeah, a lot of what we do as drafters is about the supply of information, about the creation of information and the supply of information. Not all of that information we're going to be generating. Some of it we're going to be getting from other places. So mention things in terms of the building rules consent, National Construction Code and Australian standards, etc. So we've really got to know our sources of information, where we can get all this stuff from. So first port of call for both planning and building approval is going to be the council website. So yeah, things are made much simpler for you guys now than they were previously. You can go online, you can get a whole heap of information without needing to speak to somebody. But still, or quite often, you're going to be speaking to duty planners from councils as well. They are going, as Richard alluded to earlier, is that there are so many nuances in the development plans. There's they're at times difficult to read. At times there'll be some information in there which appears to be in conflict with itself. You have overall council objectives saying we want this sort of thing, and then specific, zone specific things saying we want this sort of thing, or even within that you go, oh, they want this, but then they want that, and we can't supply both at the same time. Sometimes it's up to you guys to use that to your advantage and go, oh, this is what council are wanting. We really want to get this thing to happen. Let's say that we're giving them that by doing this that we want. There's that sort of thing. But also, you've got to be speaking to duty planners because they can provide you some insight into that as well. And you can say, well, look, this is what it says in there. There's some conflicting information. There's some grey areas. There's all sorts of things. Can you provide me with with an answer? Is this going to be okay? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Are we going down the right path? So duty planners are great for that. But beyond that, you've got your council website with all of the information, or typically all of the information you need for making that submission. They want to provide you with all that information, so you're not phoning up duty planners all the time to get that. So, Adelaide City Council website where we're going to be going to is planning and development, and then under that there will be a host of information such as information sheets and approval checklists. So lists that say we need to have these plans. We need to have a site plan, elevation, floor plan, and then for building approval we'll use various different framing plans, etc., roof drainage plan, things like that. So they'll set out what you need for your approval. They'll also say you need to have your power line clearance declaration form. You'll need to have your approval forms completed. You'll have to have your receipt for CITB, etc. So they'll have that whole checklist there. But then they'll have information sheets on things like solar panels. What do you do with solar panels? If the system is less than 100 kilos in total, then you don't need development approval for it. If it's larger than that, you do, etc. So they'll give you, and on just about all council websites, they'll have a list of building works that don't require approval. So under the Development Act, it says that if you're doing this work that requires approval, like planning approval, or actually no, sorry, if you're doing work that requires building approval, you'll have to have planning approval first. Now, if you don't require planning approval for some things, you may not require building approval for that then as well. So the councils will specify what you don't need approval for, and that can be small things like small sheds and so on in certain areas. So they'll want to control that, and so they supply all their information there. So that's going to be our first protocol. Other places for those development plans is Planning SA website as well. So you'll be able to get your development plans via there. I've brought up the Northern Payne and St Peter's Council. Actually, it's one that we don't use in this course. I'm not actually that familiar with Northern Payne and St Peter's Council, but we can all have a bit of a quick look through here ourselves and a bit of explore. So got our section on planning and development. Fact sheets, it's probably a really good one to go to. So City of Northern Payne and St Peter's developed a range of fact sheets. What is urban regional planning? Might be interesting for you. Do I need approval? There you go. So that's going to be your fact sheet on if I'm doing this work, do I need approval for that? Let's have a quick look at that. If you undertake development, you will need approval. Some examples of developments are etc., etc., etc. Let's see. Oh, they haven't made it so easy for us, so they haven't supplied a list of stuff you don't need approval for. However, I'm expecting to find it somewhere in their website. All their websites are set up differently. You will have to trawl through. You'll have to work through things. But there we go. Development application checklist. So checklist of things you need for that approval. Building requirements checklist. So for those doing the building approval, you've got to got a checklist here of what you need for the building approval. Other handy things. Complying, non-complying development. We can speak a little bit about that later on as well. What is the development plan? Might be handy for you to have a bit of a read of. Regulated and significant trees. Fact sheet on that. Could be handy, important. So we've got fact sheets there. Development strategy and policy. Do they have their link to the development plan? No. One of the top two?
Yeah, planning and development or development assessment on the left.
Oh yes, yeah. Possibly under there. Let's have a look there, see if they've got.
Oh, I see what they've done. So they've categorised it as well. So go back to planning and development.
Mm-hmm.
And then click on the one on the far right. Down a little bit. Yep.
Oh, development strategy and policy.
Yeah. They might actually have the
Plan.
They don't have the personal one there though.
No, they don't. Oh, well, let's go.
No, it's in
Planning. Oh, you found it?
this development strategy. And it's
Oh yes, under that. Thank you.
development strategy.
Yeah.
Assessment.
On the left hand side.
Left hand side.
Assessment.
Development assessment.
Oh yes, development assessment.
And then it's in the small word.
And the oh yes, they got the link there. Link there. Right. Yeah, so that's the development plan. Now let's come back to that a little bit later. So we've got our council website there. So we've found our development plan eventually, found some information sheets, didn't go into the approval checklists, but we saw where they were. Then access to Salus. Has anybody here used Salus before? Oh, Congo, I know you have. James. Yeah. Has anybody else used Salus before? So what we have in South Australia, we have what's called the Lands Titles Office. So typically to have what we term an interest in land, you typically have to pay money for that. So actually, I'm not sure why it's called the reason we call it interests in land. Probably goes way back to common law in England. But if I want to control a piece of land, so have access to that piece of land for myself and my family and my friends, anybody who I'm associated with. Typically, I'll want to have some form of title, some boundaries to that, to say, yeah, look, this is my bit of land. I'm growing my veggies here. I'm putting a house on it, keep my sheep, whatever. And I'm probably going to have to pay for that in today's system. And so, because I'm paying a lot of money for it, those boundaries, people are very interested in those boundaries being set exactly where they are, and so we've got a place called the Lands Titles Office that keeps all of that documentation about any interests that people have in the land. Typically, the interests that if you go out and you buy a house, you're going to have a freehold interest in that house, or in the land upon which that house sits. Other interests can include leasehold interests. So, and that's becoming less and less in this area, but for shacks and things like that, for beachside shacks and for river shacks and things, a lot of those shacks were initially built on what are called leasehold interests. So somebody owns, or even the government or the Crown owns land adjacent a watercourse, and then they will provide leases to people. So people purchase a lease over a defined area, and that might be a 100-year lease for which they pay next to nothing. There are things called peppercorn leases. The reason they're called peppercorn leases is because you need to have some consideration paid. So you have to have a payment of something to make it a legally binding contract, but that payment might be defined as a peppercorn. So basically, yeah, that's basically ticking the legal box. Anyhow, you've got leasehold interests over things. And it is, yeah, and as designers, it is important for you to understand what is the interest in that property. Is it a freehold interest whereby somebody has a greater level of control over that portion of land? Or is it a leasehold interest, and is the lease going to expire in a year? Is there going to be, some issue for you down the track when you've done all that work and council say, oh no, you can't have approval to build anything like that because there's only 1 year in which that lease is running, and then you're going to have to demolish it, for example. Or that threw up issues with with real estate valuation back when I was doing that in that people, yeah, anyhow. So very important to understand the interest in land. Also, other examples of leasehold interests are pastoral properties. So for large stations, etc., they won't have freehold interest over that land. They'll have a leasehold interest. So they'll have a lease to the Crown, and they'll be on time periods as well. And then with those interests, those freehold interests can be further divided as well between different forms of title. So we've got the freehold and leasehold interests, and then we've got certificates of title which specify how that piece of land is owned. One really common form is, well, the most common form is Torrens title, which is where you have separate portions of land. Another very common one, which is only came about in the mid-90s, is called community title, whereby you have a piece of land, an allotment, which is carved up between several different interests. So you can have an attribution of a small portion of land to a person who owns part of a community title. So that's in a geographic sense. And then you've got community strata title. So strata refers to height above ground level. So you can own a small portion of land within an allotment at a defined height above the ground. So that's for somebody who owns an apartment, for example. So we've got apartment buildings built on this one allotment, and then you own a little piece within a height above the ground. That's your apartment. That enables that sort of ownership to happen. And then that system was brought in essentially to replace strata title. So strata title was a simpler form of that ownership, where you also have strata bodies that you have to pay money to who maintain those facilities, etc. And those fees can get quite expensive. That maintenance fees for that. So we've got different types of ownership as well. All of that is controlled by the Lands Titles Office. So the Lands Titles Office keep all of that documentation. Now, it was not too long ago where you had physical paper copies of things. If you were to go into the Lands Titles Office, to their title room, you're only allowed to bring in lead pencil, because ink, that sort of thing, they didn't want anybody who could go make a permanent mark, because they were their copies of things. That has now changed. Well, so it changed probably getting on 20 years ago, or yeah, about that. Whereas everything is now lodged electronically. So you can print out, you can purchase a copy of a certificate of title, and you can print that out and have a physical print of it. But the thing is, there's no great deal of value in that printout anymore above the cost of $20 or so that it costs you to get that from the Land Titles Office, because that title is always kept in electronic form. there now, and yeah, and when a piece of land changes hands, you have conveyancers create that changeover and lodge your details on that certificate of title, and I'll show you some. In fact, I'll show you a example of a certificate of title now. Make it a bit smaller so we can see the whole thing. Has everybody seen a certificate of title before? Anybody not? Yeah. Few, yes. You've seen before? Levi, no? No. So, yeah. So that's your certificate of title. It's got two elements really. It's got your first page, and now this is an incredibly simple, very clean certificate of title. A lot of certificates of title have, well, this one's got no easements on it. It's got, a very simple description of the land, and then no documents affecting that title, no caveats, no encumbrances. There's a mortgage on it. That's the only dealings on that certificate of title. Some certificates of title have a lot of things included on them. I alluded to earlier. Developers' encumbrances, they will be shown on this page, and it will say encumbrance to blah 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 corp, right? And then you have to look at the particulars of that encumbrance to see, okay, what materials can I use, what can't I use, etc. So that's your legal description of that piece of land. So it says it's fee simple. So it's not going to be a leasehold interest. So that's a piece of land that can be bought and sold and transacted without anybody else being involved in that part of the conveyancer. It shows who the registered proprietor is. So who owns that piece of land at that point? Who owns that interest in fee simple? It then gives a description of the land. So that is section 303 in 100 of Onkaparinga in Basket Range. So our state is divided up into allotments, sections, and hundreds. So we've got, like Adelaide Hills Council probably wouldn't let anybody go carving that up. They don't really like things being carved up anymore into separate allotments. If they did, however, you could then carve that up, and there would be allotment 1 in section 303 in the 100 of Onkaparinga. So that says that is this piece of land, and that section 303 that relates to that survey plan image. So, and that survey plan image says that this allotment starts, at this location, and is 119 degrees and 33 minutes in this direction from that point there for 96.76 meters. From there, it's that corner is almost 90-degree corner, 89 degrees 59 minutes, 452 meters up to there. So it says, in a geographic sense, that is the boundary, and then the surveyors interpret that information on the ground. They put the pegs in to say this is exactly where the boundaries are. So this description, together with that survey plan image, give us the description of that land. And no other piece of land will have that exact same description. Oh, and I missed one important thing. Every title has a volume reference and a folio reference. No other title will have exactly the same volume and folio reference, so they each have their unique reference. That enables them to be owned separately. In the case of things like flats, so that's distinct from units. So you've got units that have their own separate title, and that might be strata title, etc. There's a thing called flats. There's not that many of them around now. It was a period in time where people would build multi-residential buildings on one certificate of title without the creation of separate certificates of title. A lot of those places have now had firewalls installed, separate certificates of title created and sold off separately, but it might be something that you've come across possibly. There's still a few existing around the place. Because they only have the one certificate of title for that piece of land and no separate titles created for those separate units, you can't purchase a separate unit individually. If you want to buy a unit there, you've got to buy the whole lot because there's no separate title created. Apart from that, typically any piece, any sort of thing that you reside in, anything you buy to live in or do whatever you want with, is going to have its own separate certificate of title. Then on there, so you've got your description of the land, and you've got easements. Does everybody? Well, we'll have a discussion about easements. But does everybody know what an easement is in this room? No? Yes? No? Okay. Yeah. So typically easements.
An area of land defined by council or a
Service provider?
Service which is not to be built on due to the fact of access to that particular service. So it might be something like a main pipeline has been put in, so nothing can be built in that area. If something is built in that area, that then goes to council and has to be rectified. And can become very problematic with even the services putting an endowment or a lockdown essentially on building on that property just because someone has put something on that easement.
Does every building have an easement?
Not every property will have an easement. It's based on how everything gets subdivided.
Does having an easement affect the price or the value of the house?
It will affect possible buildings going on it, so in a way it can. So there's a few properties I know of where, say, someone would like to put a pool out the back, but there's an easement there, so they're not able to do that, which can affect property prices because it's a piece of land that must retain basic form and have access to.
Yeah. Is it a selling point, Michael, with your history in real estate?
What's that?
Is having an easement, not having an easement a selling point for a property?
Well, yes, it is. When it comes,
or just a block.
Yeah. When it comes to easements, it's always going to be a case by case basis. So, as Richard said, the easement stops you from building in a certain location. That easement might be of negligible effect on a building. It might be, council might say, you're not allowed to build within the first 8 metres of your allotment. Anyhow, we have that setback, and the first 2 metres will be an easement for drainage or something like that. That really doesn't affect the value of that property because the easement is over an area which you're not going to be building on or doing anything on either. Or, it might be a really large allotment. You've got a power line running through over a really undulating bit where you're not going to be building anyhow. It's going to have no effect on the value. In fact, it might have a positive effect on the value because you've actually got a power line there that you can get power from. So it's always going to be a case-by-case basis. But that's one of the first things. If somebody says, oh, I want you to design a house for me, we've got this allotment, one of the first things you're going to be wanting to have a look at is that certificate of title, the survey plan image, and going, do we have any easements there that stop us from building on that? Because if we've got an easement running smack through the middle of the allotment, stops you from being able to build on there, well then, that's going to have a massive effect, or it's going to have a massive effect on that block of land, but it's going to have a massive effect on how you design, or if you even design for that allotment. Having said that, so Well, so these are easements. This is an example easement here, and this is a more detailed view of that block of land with an easement. So we've got this is our allotment here. Got an easement running across there, and we've got an easement here as well. This is a block, parcel of land I know fairly well, and it's actually got a house right there. And so, so that house is really difficult to do any extensions to and things like that because we've got easements all around it, and the topography of that area sort of means that it can't. There's not many other opportunities. So place like that, yes, the easements significantly affect the value of that. I can't remember exactly what that's right, but not all easements are always set in stone as well. Remember that. Yes, you see an easement. That's definitely something to be explored, and that's going to direct what you end up designing. But I've had it previously where there was an easement on a property for a power line, and it was a really wide easement. I thought that's abnormal. That's strange. They would have such a wide easement for a low voltage power line across this property. Turns out it was a road which had been surveyed there previously. The road never got built, like a 3-chain wide road, like a fairly wide road. They never built the road anyhow because they built the road somewhere else. But then when SA Power X, or was it ETSA before that, decided to put that power line through there, they go, okay, we've got this bit surveyed, let's call that our easement. And so I was able to approach SA Power Networks and say, look, you've got this really wide easement here for this power line, which doesn't need that distance. Are we able to encroach upon that easement? And they said, yes, you are able to encroach upon that easement. You are able to build upon that easement. You have to provide us a written submission of what you're requesting, and then we'll give you written advice to say yay or nay. So always explore these things, because easements are not always set in stone. They're maintained for the purpose for which they're created, to enable the supply or access or so of things. So with that, that one, for example, that easement may be contested because that one's for water supply to another property that no longer requires water supply. And so by negotiating with those other adjoining owners for the removal of that easement, then may open this area up for building upon. That's for power line. That one probably can't be renegotiated. So, and it's not a really wide easement. So yeah, 4 meters wide, that easement. So typically you'll have your survey plan image that shows your easements on there, so you can see the exact location of it. But then, and that's in a broader context. So our which allotment are we there? We're this one here. All right. So that's the larger survey plan image showing that in context. So that's the neighbouring property there. That shows it in context, and that's the detailed one of the subject allotment. But then, probably be handy to flip that around. But then you've got your description of those easements as well. So it says, easement A, existing 20 metres long, blah blah blah, and we have some purposes written there for that one. Subject to this lease, so you have to look up that lease, etc. So, yeah, I read that in conjunction with a bunch of other documents. But basically, you have these descriptions of the easement, and then there may be other documents attached to that to give you insight into the nature of that. So you get attached with your certificate of title. Yeah, Levi.
Is there any to find other people, like is it database where you can find information about a title?
Yeah. That's sort of how we got onto this. So that so Salus, so that website I took you to before. Let's have a, we'll scoot back to that now. Oh, where is it? Which one is it? Oh, just yeah. Sorry, I just had that as the PowerPoint Salus, but I can get that website
So you can see
happening for you.
anybody's title really.
Yeah. Thing is, you have to pay for it. That's the
Or the
what's that?
to pay to look at someone or pay for sales.
Now, well, for Salus you can go in as a guest user, but you have to pay to look at things. Yeah, it's becoming even more and more restricted. I had a muck around with it last night. There's some things on there you used to be able to do a couple months ago that you can't do now. They're tightening up things a little bit. As students, I haven't tried it in a long time, but you may be able to go into the Lands Titles office and say, hey, look, I'm a student, I want access to this stuff, can I get access to this stuff for free? That's worked for me previously, to go in there to get access, to be looking at things. I won't require you to be doing stuff that you can't get access for free within this subject. But yeah, typically now for any of this information on sales, you've got to pay for it. And you can create your own login. For a certificate of title, I think it's $20 or $24 or something like that these days. Survey plan image, don't know what that costs now. But yeah, we'll have a look at sales now. But yeah, basically you've got to pay for everything for that now. But this next one, yeah, I'm a massive fan. It's a map viewer. If you don't know about it already, use it, get to know it. It's really cool. That has all of it. Has links to, well, not all of the information that the Lands Titles Office have. So the Lands Titles Office keep your certificates of title, your ownership information, and your survey plan images. You don't have access to those things through SA Map Viewer. You still have to buy those, but for a lot of for all your cadastral information, and when I go talking about property boundaries and ownership, that all comes under this umbrella as being cadastre or cadastral information. So you've got your various different types of maps. You've got your topographic map, cadastral map, soil map, these sorts of things. Cadastral shows property boundaries. So SA Map Viewer has all of that embedded, but it also has satellite images over the top, and we'll go on there and we'll have a muck around with it soon. But it's also got all your stuff like for the council for your zoning categories, so you can get your zone information from there. A lot of geographic information such as topography, so you can bring up your topographic maps in there and see the slope of land, and then it's got all your built environment stuff like where SA water pipelines run, where other services run, where sewage lines run as well. So as designers, you can be looking on there and go, oh look, we've got a water supply here. We've got this. We've got that. So you can get all that information through SA Map Viewer. Just quickly to make sure we've finished our exploration of titles. So yeah, so we're talking about easements before, and we touched on a little bit on encumbrances before. So I mentioned developers' encumbrances. The term encumbrance that comes from the Old English word like to encumber, to limit. So if I'm encumbered, it means there's something that I can't do. And so an encumbrance lodged on a title means somebody tells you that you can't do something with that allotment of land. So an encumbrance might be an easement because there's a third party that says you can't build on this bit, or you have to enable access through that bit. other encumbrances can be caveats. So if I'm a builder, I do some work for somebody, and that person says, "Oh, well, thanks for building that thing for me, but I don't want to pay you." A thing of an avenue of recourse I have is to go to the court and lodge a caveat on that property to say that property cannot be sold until that debt to me is paid. So that's, but then there's, caveats can be lodged for matrimonial disputes, for family disputes about things, to say, look, we want to stop that person selling that piece of land until the will and testament is thoroughly worked through, for example. So we've got caveats that are encumbrances. Other encumbrances, like strange ones, are things. There's a thing called moiety title, which is that you probably won't see a moiety title place unless you're working in some of the older areas of Port Adelaide, whereby it was a system of title where adjoining properties, so properties that have a wall that they both, a structural wall that they both mount off of, they each had an interest, a portion of interest in each other's property. It's a strange form of title. That's another form of encumbrance, because your neighbour can stop you doing something to your property, and vice versa. But you can understand why it's not a very popular form of title, and that one was quickly moved on from. So you've got all those various different encumbrances. It's important to have a look at your certificates of title, see what schedule of dealings and what notifications there are on that title, and to see what easements or etc. there are. So, just thinking about our approach to the lesson. So, yeah, all right. I'll get into development plans later. While we're talking about access to cadastral information and all this information, we can have a look at Salus, and also have a look at SA Map Viewer. Oh, done with that one for now. Done with that one. That one. So, but yeah, and just, I suggest everybody have bring this up in front of you. So just in your search, just type in SALIS, spelled S-A-L-I-S, for South Australian Land Integrated Services, or so. And scroll down. So you've got, in fairly obvious here, you got your account customer login, and this is all just changed. I think it changed on the weekend, because last night I didn't have access to it. This morning I got in there and it's all looking different. So I've got this here, account customer login. They want you to be account customers, etc., etc. But hidden away right down the bottom is guest user. So you can click onto that link there as guest user, and go in there and do the same. So for your account customers, you've got the access to the various different services there. But as guest user, go in, and you've got property location browser. Now that's essentially like the parent platform for the SA Map Viewer. So you'll find all the information to be the same across the two, but being the thing from which SA Map Viewer was built, it's a slightly less user friendly. When last semester, I had students use Salus for gathering information on parcels of land, because it was really good in that you could produce reports. whereas they've made that not as functional now this semester. I'll show you how to use it, etc. But you might prefer to be using SA Map Viewer now instead. So property location browser, okay, view PLB. Okay, does anybody want to give me an allotment or a property address to look at? Don't have to. I can think of one. I'm trying to think. Can't think of our address here. 1128. Maybe it is. I don't know. Let's have a look at that. 1128. See, test my memory. Gonna come up? No. Trying to think of an address that's not the one for our thing. So that's just a random one. I don't know who lives there also. So there we go. It's in the corner of Doothie Street and Sheffield Street, Unley Melbourne area. So our property location browser shows us the boundaries of that allotment, and we can zoom out and we can go, oh yeah, okay, this one here, they've got separate titles for little bits and pieces here. That's probably going to be a community plan allotment or a strata title, but most likely community plan. We go, oh, this allotment here has a funny little bit chopping into theirs. Possibly they built a shed there before the boundaries were properly established, and they had to do that, for example. But it gives you an idea of allotments, etc. around. Within that, you can choose to have. Let's go to administration. Got various different check boxes. Development plan zoning. So RHC is H6, so it's we're going to have to go to the appropriate council website to see what that zoning relates to. But yeah, probably a lot about. I'll just get into this just quickly. Valuation labels. Okay. Yeah, so it's valuation labels. Like a certificate of title reference, every separate parcel of land within South Australia has a valuation reference as well. So the state government, for paying emergency services levy and council rates, they're determined from the value of your property. And so you've got the Valuer General's office, who determine a rough site value and capital value for every portion, every piece of land. So everything that has a separate certificate of title will also have a separate valuation reference. For example, if I owned 3 certificates of title like that, you know, this one was a tennis court, that was the pool, and this one's the house, I don't want to be paying separate council rates for each one. I can apply for them to be merged under the one valuation reference. Apart from situations like that, you're always going to find that each piece of land has its own separate valuation reference. That's an important thing to know, because that number can be a handy number for linking to other information on sale lists. So if I want to go ordering certificates of title and getting all this information, things like that, that valuation reference, that 9-digit number, can help me find that. But yeah, and please bear with me. It's been a while since I've used this, because do prefer map viewer. But we've got in here we've got certificates of we can choose certificates of title and so on to be shown as well. I've got parcel labels. That's a and from that, once we've done that, we can produce a map report. Now this is the feature which has been diminished since last. Okay. Internet Explorer blocked pop-up from there. Okay, I'll allow that. Okay. This is the feature which has been diminished since last semester. So last semester you're able to select various different things. Okay, well, that's, yeah. Okay. Unfortunately, we lost our bit of land there. So previously, what you were able to do, and I might have a bit of a muck around with this in the following weeks, but I was having a muck around with it this morning. Can't find out how to bring all the various bits and pieces of information into one neat little report, as you used to be able to do. So what you can do now is you find your piece of land, you go through those check boxes, you say, I want this, want this, want this, and then you go print report. It shows you that boundary of land, and then it says council, location, zoning, etc. But what you previously used to be able to do is get the council zoning, the cadastral information, the wind speed, the bushfire attack level, everything all printed onto that one page, where you can just grab that and put that into your assignment here. Now you have to get it as separate pages. It's not that convenient anymore. So yeah, probably property location browser has lost its esteem for use within this subject. I'll just see if I can scoot back to Salus though. But within Salus, we go in as a guest user. And yeah. Okay, yeah, things have changed a lot just recently, so bear with me on this. Let's research. Okay. So if we want to get information on a property, I think I've got a title reference here. Yeah. So 5415 and folio 32. So I've put in that title reference, and then I'm able to purchase all these various different pieces of information from the Lands Titles Office. So beyond the property location browser they provide, they also provide this service where you can purchase these things. Okay, so Register Cert provides an authorised copy of a certificate of title or crown lease. So before I showed you that certificate of title, you can purchase one of the, it's $28.75 now. So you can purchase a copy of that for like a PDF, of that certificate of title for $28.75. I won't be demanding that any of you guys shell out any money throughout this. And if we hit areas where you require some information and you can't find a way of getting it without paying for it, let me know. So if you want that certificate of title, that's where you purchase one from. Okay, so you can get the slimmed down version, provides current information about the title, including registered proprietors, parcel details, last sales details, constraints, and the valuation number. You can purchase just that piece of information for $10.20 instead. So your certificate of title, your full one, will have your complete legal description and your survey plan image. This will have part of the legal description and ownership details. Title and valuation package. So has a bunch of things, but also has site and capital values. So earlier I referred to state government having a valuation on every separate parcel of land. They've got their site value, their capital value. That's being able to purchase that sort of stuff, and that's an indicative value on things. It's those values are derived through application of statistical models to determine things. So it's not that somebody's actually been to that property and go, oh, that's got got a really nice new roof. It's worth this much money. They've just simply applied a statistical model to these things. So they should always be seen as being general. These things here, building details, provides information for the dwelling on the property such as year built, building style, and roof construction. That's also very general information. If you purchase that piece of information, probably what you'll get is a description going, saying 5H, DIG, for example. So that's all you get for your $1.90. That means it's a house with 5 main rooms. So somebody from the Value General's department has looked at the building plans initially and gone, okay, well, that room's large enough to be called classed as a main room. That little sunroom at the back is not classed as a main room. We won't count that one. So it says that one's got 5 main rooms. So we see that probably 3-bedroom house with a living area and kitchen dining. And then 5H DIG, so it's got a double iron garage on the property. That's probably the extent of that information you get about building details. And yeah, okay. Renumbered cancelled details shows any valuation records that have been cancelled or have any proposed valuation numbers. So that might be handy for you if you're working in an area which has recently been subdivided and there's not complete information about that allotment you're looking for at the time. So using that certificate of title reference, or if you get the valuation number reference, you can purchase these things through sales. So it's the Land Titles Office portal. But get SA Map Viewer happening, and I suggest those that don't have it running on their computers already do that now. Okay, I might. It's got a bunch of things turned on already. Scoot through, see if I can take stuff out of it. When you guys open up yours on your computer, does it have a bunch of things? No, doesn't. Yeah, it must be linked. Possibly it's linked with my login. So if I do something on a computer elsewhere, it automatically opens the same thing up. But we'll go, because we know that number 90 Doothie Street exists, we'll go there again. So SA Map Viewer, much like Google Earth, except you can't drop the little man onto the street to look at things in elevation. But it's got interesting things. Oh, number 90 Doothie Street. That's that set of shops. There we go. So it's a set of shops there. But that's interesting because that was all under one title. You've got choice between several different types of maps, so you can show your satellite image. You can show it as roads, which is typically typically the way you want to work because it's not confused with the whole, like the image is nice and clear and you can see everything else you get put on there. But the other really good one is the topographic. So where you get to see the topography. Sometimes your contour lines are in intervals of 2 meters, and sometimes they're in intervals of 5 meters on this viewer. This is very flat land. I'd expect so. That contour line 70 meters. That one, yeah. Pretty sure they're going to be. Oh no, they're in intervals of 10 meters. This one. Oh, until we move in a bit further. Yeah. Unfortunately for this example, it's not too easy to. Oh, they'll be in intervals of 5 meters. So our contour lines here in this example are 5 meters. Sometimes you'll see intervals of 2 meters. But that topographic information could be super handy for you in certain circumstances. Beyond that, you can use either data sets or data search. So data sets for when you get a little bit more familiar with what you're going to be looking for. Data search is for if you want to find, you go, I don't really know what I'm looking for, but it might be this, and you put the name in there and search for it. So let's say somebody's asked us to do a design for this property. What sort of things would I want to be looking for in my data sets? If I could have an example from every person in this room.
What area it is, like residential zone, zoning.
Yep. Okay. Zoning. So yeah, we can do data search, and we go zoning. Oh, State Marine Park Network zoning, probably not really the thing we're. Yep. All right. We'll do one thing at a time. Yep. So let's have a look in our data sets. So any ideas where we're going to be finding zoning information under our lists there?
Land management and boundaries.
Yep. Land management, boundaries. It's not under there. Possibly property and planning. Land development plan zone categories. So let's tick that one. And then as soon as we tick that one, it goes blue. And the other side of the road goes pink. That tells us we've got one zone here, one zone there. And once we've selected that, we can click on here, like double click, and it will give us that information that we've asked for. So, zone residential historic conservation. So straight up, we know, all right, residential historic conservation, there are going to be historic constraints here, or there are going to be historic considerations there, and it's policy area SH6. Policy area 6, spacious historic. So that's probably steering us in a certain line of thinking already. I'm thinking pitched roofs, finials, and historic features, larger buildings, greater open space once again around that building. So probably not a place to be doing a modern unit development, for example. So, Sarika, you mentioned bushfire. Yeah. So we want to know, are there any bushfire constraints? So under our data sets, do you know where we'll find that?
The seamless property and planning.
So property and planning and bushfire protection areas. So we've got that selected. Go. What's here? We don't have anything coming up under bushfire. That's not surprising. Okay. Anybody else got a thing that we might want to search for with our property location browser?
Water pipe infrastructure.
Yeah, water pipe infrastructure. Any idea how we find that one?
So infrastructure and utilities.
Yep. So infrastructure and utilities. Infrastructure and utilities once again. Water main. There we go. So we've got a water main happening there. Any other ideas what we might want to have a look for?
Your wind category.
Oh, somebody hasn't said one before. Someone, yeah.
No one's saying anything, so wind
Yeah.
category.
I don't know. Who wants to take ownership of wind category apart from Richard? Anybody, quickly. All right, wind category. Thanks, Levi. That was great. That's an excellent suggestion. All right. Where will we find wind category, Levi? Environment and climate. Possibly. Actually, I can't remember where you find it. Possibly it's under land. No, it's not under landscape and water. Let's go to land management.
It's property and planning.
Property and planning. Yeah, and then it's down the bottom.
Design wind speed.
Oh, design wind speed. So towards the top. Design wind speed. There we go. So things changed colour. We have information on our design wind speed. So let's go to click on what's there. Wind speed, 28 meters per second, category N1. So low wind speed there, not a great deal of constraints for building. Yeah, I'll probably leave it. They're the main ones we're going to want to see. But we might want to see, if we're not in Unley, we might want to see corrosive environments. If we're in an industrial area, we might want to have a look at soil types. Where actually even in Unley, we probably want to have a look at soil types. We may want to have a look at having if there's a sewer main going past. We might want to have a look to see if there's electricity lines there. Unley, we're going to be fairly sure that there are. Other.
If you're closer to the beach, you want to look at consistency for zonings.
Right.
Because of course your wind category and everything goes up with that. But a lot of zones near the beach have bigger setbacks and a lot of different changes to make them viable for being in the beach.
Yeah. So rather than like a large block of historic conservation zone we've got there, when you getting to places like the beach or in the city or older developed corridors, you've got tiny little patches of zoning. So specific. And that's what you were getting at with that. Yeah. So you'll see that with your zone. Yep.
Wednesday, is that class or is that a workshop?
That's class as well. Yeah. So, yeah, and just quickly, just before we break for lunch, we've got planning and building. Some of you doing planning only, some of you doing planning approval and building approval. For the first 4 weeks, it's all planning approval. Because you've got to do planning approval before you do building approval. That's the way that it's set up. So so for those doing planning approval and building approval, you've got to do the planning approval part of project 1 before you can start moving on to building approval of project 1. We've got class from Mondays 10 till 1, and then from 1 o'clock, then from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And then Wednesdays 10 to 1, and then 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. So it's a lot of class time. For all those 4 classes, at the start, it's all planning approval until we get into, get past that first project. Then it begins to be planning approval and building approval. So everybody's going to be going at the same pace to begin with, and the whole thing is going to be, well, it's going to be class and workshop. Look, I suggest that you make all the classes, because within the class, yes, we'll be explaining some things and going through some things, but you'll also be working on things and being able to ask me, okay, can I do this? And we'll also be running consults as well. So there's a lot of consultation that has to happen, and these are formalised, and I'll talk more about those later on. They're going to be held throughout the weeks as well within these class times and workshop times. So it's in your best interest to attend all of them until I start telling you, okay, now you can start coming in at these specific times and easing back a bit. So thanks for bringing that up. So we'll stop for lunch now, unless anybody else has any other things they want to have a look at in SA Map Viewer.
So we've got a class after this.
So we do have a class after this. Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I haven't got anything here.
Right. Okay.
I'm only here from 10 to 1.
I think if
Yeah.
you're doing both, like planning approval will be 10 to 1 and building approval say 2 to 4. But we're sort of just doing, I guess, both in both times.
Yes, because for the first section, because everything's planning approval from now. Is that? Yeah. So that didn't. Yeah, it's not what was mentioned. Yeah, right. Okay, cool. Well, we can certainly work with that. Yeah, last semester it worked. Nobody else had conflicting things. So it's not a problem we've had to work through before. But yeah, we can certainly work with that. So your time schedule shows you on Wednesdays in the morning again as well.
Yeah, just 10 to 1, Monday and Wednesday.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm going to have to work it in that way, and that's the same with yours as well. Right. Okay. So the two of you will have to do a little bit more work independently. Outside of the class, because you've got other classes now this evening. Do you this afternoon?
That's what it says. Well, I can withdraw from it.
No, don't. Yeah. Don't go withdrawing. Don't. Yeah. No, because we can do it. We can work it. But yeah. And you've got a class.
No, I've just got to be elsewhere.
Oh, you've got to be elsewhere. Yeah, for sure. You'll work around it. Yeah. So, so what that's going to mean is that you have to do a bit more work independently. I'll be aware of that, cognizant of that, and work with that to help you keep up the same pace. Because you're doing the planning approval only, that means essentially when we get to the end of the semester, you're going to have 3 weeks. If you've kept pace with everything, then you're going to have 3 weeks at the end where you can go, right, that's it, I'm done. I've got time for other subjects. That's the benefit. Well, it's part of the benefit in keeping up a good pace at the start. If you can't do that, well then we'll have to work.
I can check if they can change the other subject to another day.
Oh yeah, to another class. Yeah, possibly. What's the other subject you've got?
Structural integrity.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was supposed to talk to the teacher.
Yeah, yeah, do that. But yeah, because it'd be a benefit to you if you can be in all the classes. Otherwise, we can can certainly work.
Yeah, are you putting these recordings on this website?
So currently on the website there's all the recordings from semester 2, 2018. So there's a link to that. I think I've created a new playlist for semester 1, 2019. If I have, there'll only be an introductory video in there for now, and then I'll be putting these class recordings in there as we go through. So, well, since you two have to head off, I'd better. So what we're going to do in the afternoon class is we're going to have a crack at doing task number 1. I'm pretty confident that both of you would be able to do that yourselves independently at home. But we'll quickly have a look at that. So have a muck around with that yourselves in your own time. But quickly before we break for lunch, then we'll just go through that for your benefit. What's that?
I'll come back here.
Yeah. Cool. So the subject is broken between 3 projects. We've got project 1 planning, project 2 planning, project 3 planning, and then building approval for these exact same projects as well. For project 1, we've got a whole series of tasks. So task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Yay. So lots of tasks. They're all fairly small. You'll get much quicker at them as we progress through. What we have to do this week is task number 1. So click on that and open it up. It says on Salus, property location browser. Probably just use SA Map Viewer now. Salus is not the machine it used to be for producing the reports, but use either one. Locate council zone, property location zone, wind category, energy efficiency, climate zone. Oh, that's one thing I didn't mention earlier on as well. So the NCC has climate zones. You can choose that in your data sets on SA Map Viewer as well. Locate council website, locate and complete planning approval application forms, locate completing power line notification form, establish drawings documentation required to be submitted to council, establish any further additional supporting documentation specific for this design, solar panel application process, etc. So look through your fact sheets. So what you need to do is you need to go to SA Map Viewer, get a bunch of this information. Go to the council website, get a bunch of this information, compile it all into a report. So does everybody know use the snipping tool? So yes, everybody? No? So on, or screenshot, snipping tool, screenshot, whatever. Just grab bits and pieces of this information. You'll have to type out some of it, etc., but just compile it all into a very brief report for uploading onto the portal on Learn. So Richard, you'll probably be fine with that, doing that yourself at home? Yeah. So go through that, get it all, put it into a report and submit that. If you can do that by Wednesday, that's great. If you have any issues, we can chat about it on Wednesday. But no expecting that. And so then for the rest of you, we'll be going through that this afternoon, give you that opportunity to have a crack at that in class. So thank you very much, and I'll see some of you in an hour's time, and some back here. Yep. Actually, I will just check that. I'm fairly sure it's back in this class.